Okay, and now what we're going to do is move into the selling portion of the course. This is where you're going to make your money after you've acquired the property via subject to. You need to immediately market it for resale. So that's what we're going to work on next. Now, here's some things to consider. First is the house vacant or is it occupied? Because you're going to need a different strategy depending upon which one where it fits. It's actually easier to sell if it's vacant because that allows for you to obviously go into the house, clean it up if there's a mess in the house, make sure that it's in marketable condition inside. It allows for you to do an independent assessment of any, potential deferred maintenance or damage to the property, and factor that into how you're going to resell it. It also allows you to go ahead and put a sign in front of the property, as well as put a lockbox on the door. So it is easier if it's vacant. It allows for you to move a little quickly, independently of the seller. However, if it's occupied, you have to make arrangements for the tenant buyer to view the property. So you'll have to schedule a time with the seller to determine what time is convenient for them so that they can allow for the potential tenant buyer to come in and take a look inside of the house. Now, you can have the tenant buyer drive by the house and take a look at the outside, but what you want to do is tell them, hey, drive by the house, take a look at the outside. If you like what you see from the outside, let me know and I'll make arrangements for you to see the interior. So that's how you handle that. Now, also if it's occupied and you've made arrangements for the tenant buyer to view the house, if you're not going to be there, I would definitely recommend that you, in no uncertain terms, make it clear to the seller that they are not to discuss the details of your transaction with the seller, meaning that the seller to you portion of the transaction is not to be discussed in any detail at all with your potential tenant buyer. That can blow your deal. So you have to make sure that that does not happen. If you're not confident enough in the seller to make sure that doesn't happen, then you probably need to be there when your tenant buyer arrives. Now, after you've done the title search and everything is clear, actually, really before that, once you get the contract signed and you've already sent it over to your attorney, you need to immediately place an ad on Craigslist for resale. Now, typically what I like to do is put a Google Voice number in there. That way, in case I miss the call, at least I'll get a transcription or a voice recording that I can always call back. But you immediately want to put an ad on Craigslist. And I'll give an example on how to do that shortly. But here's what you're going to do. It's basically going to be a catch-all ad. If you're offering owner, whether it's going to be either owner finance or lease option terms, and how do you determine which one it falls under? It depends on the callers and how much money they have. If you'll offer owner financing, if they have 10% down or more. If all your callers, if they're limited to anywhere between 3 and 5% of your asking price, then you want to limit it to a lease option with an option deposit. Now, since I started off in Texas, I've mostly focused on owner finance deals. However, I've done lease options as well. So I typically like to target, ideally, an owner finance sale, because obviously that down payment is pure profit and your goal obviously is to make as much money on this as possible. So, as the calls are coming in, people are showing interest, you're going to pre-screen them out and you're going to find out what they have to put down. And if they fall within the owner finance criteria, 10% plus down, obviously those are going to be the ones you want to focus on. If you don't get those calls, unfortunately, nobody that's calling in has that much money down. You want to make sure a minimum of 3 to 3.5% as an option deposit in order to sell it. If you decide to take anything less than that, you're going to regret it later, I promise you, because you need to have people who have a vested interest, at least have enough discipline to save up at least 3%, of an option deposit in order to get in. Now, you're going to make the terms pretty similar. But obviously with lease option, they're not going to get the deed, whereas with owner financing, they will get the deed. And we'll go over that a little bit later. Now, you're marketing the house, obviously, for tenant buyers. You want to inspect the house, like I said, if it's vacant, for any potential turnoffs, like if you've seen stained carpet, anything on the walls you think might turn a particular buyer off. If there's a deck, like say for instance, there's a deck in the front of the house where they have to walk up, a wooden deck where they have to walk up a flight of steps before they enter the front door, and it's a little rickety, shaky, that could be a turn off because the tenant buyer is going to think that it's not safe. Same thing for the rear of the house. If there's a wooden deck and it's shaky and rickety, they're not going to feel it's safe, and that could be a turn off. If there's an issue with the air conditioning, possible turn off. All these things you can either fix. You have to understand also the buyer's going to be living in the house, so you're looking for somebody who wants to move into it ASAP. So you're going to have to make sure the house is in the condition, it's in marketable condition that would allow for a buyer to move in fairly quickly. And if it's not quite in marketable condition, it at least needs to be close enough where you can fix it. At least if it needs a little coat of paint, that's not much. You might even be able to negotiate with the tenant buyer, which I've done on several occasions, to have them go ahead and paint it, maybe make a concession if necessary. But a lot of times when tenant buyers move in the house, they wind up painting it anyway. So, I wouldn't go through a lot of trouble if it's not necessary. So you want to make sure the house is in marketable condition. Now, if the house is occupied, obviously you want to go in and do an inspection as well. Have the seller tell you if any defects that they may be aware of. A lot of times they don't disclose to you everything that might be wrong with the house because they think it'll turn you off from buying it. But that's something you actually need to know. Now, when it comes to the yard, you want to make sure the yard is in nice condition. It's well landscaped. Obviously, buying a house is a highly emotional decision, and if there's anything that would turn the buyer off, it could be something simple. I mean, it doesn't take much to cut the grass, but having overgrown grass and stained walls can actually turn off a lot of buyers. So you have to make sure the house is as close to pristine condition as possible. Make sure the house is clean inside and out. And if it's vacant, go ahead and put a lockbox on the code. I like Sherlock, that's SHURLOCK. It's a combination lock because a lot of times I don't like to meet the tenant buyers at the property, and I'll go on to how to pre-screen them out later. But those are the things that you want to consider or to do immediately after you've got it under contract, and the contract, once you send it over to the attorney's office, they've determined that there's clear title.